really adopted her, and she is sitting in the car, and I mean, it just through the story, as it progresses, she gets into the car. She's been stifling her emotions, and her thoughts for so long that she doesn't know how to protest. She doesn't know how to tell anyone. She just gets into the car, and she just keeps wondering, why did she have to be rescued anyway? She had run away from that other lady, and as she looks outside, when the when the car moves, she sees the traffic whizzing by. She sees the poor women sitting amidst the garbage, and she wonders, why couldn't I go there? Why couldn't I have a life like that? I mean, why do I need to go and live in such a place where I am at the mercy of someone? So is she my rescuer?
Okay.
Or is she something else?
Interesting, very powerful. Yes, that's great. I'm so glad to hear how your story developed. So Sunita, I did think of you a little bit when I picked these paragraphs also because of the music, not necessarily, but just that little bit, you know.
India, I've taken the liberty of kind of breaking up your opening paragraph, Indira,
Yes.
because for me it was like, it wasn't the opening. It was
Yes.
part of my story.
Yes.
I'm going to read very quick. I find it very difficult to give a summary. I'll just do this very quick.
Yes.
It was 4 years since she had been lifted out of the green BMC garbage can by the calloused hands of Amma, the oldest rag picker in the colony. There was barely enough life in her for us to see her cobalt blue eyes staring at you. Amma held her tentatively but firmly, petrified that she might crack a bone or hurt her in any way. She took her to her little corner under the overpass, and that became her home for the next few years. Purvi was younger than Raji. They passed by that junction every day on their way to school. Raji would get mad whenever the old lady knocked on their window, leaving a slimy stain on it. The baby would be peering at them curiously as they bickered with each other while shooing the two of them away. Mrs. Sen had been married for nearly 10 years. Her music had kept her busy, but that did not help her forget that her body refused to bear fruit and she craved for a child. It was Purvi who could not keep her mind off those blue eyes. It was Purvi who stopped the car when she saw Amma's body lying lifeless on the pavement, the pink doll in shreds beside her. It was Purvi who picked the girl up and took her to the adoption center run by her mother. That was the day. And then on their way to the adoption center, when the two of them are taking her, is when your intersection, overpass and pink doll and all that happens. And then that was the day Mrs. Sen came in with her application. A girl, she said. I want a girl.
Wow.
And then she holds her and she says she's going to sing.
Extraordinary. That's great. That's very clever to break it up, actually. Yeah. Who'd like to go next?
From whatever I have understood, I have written 2-3 paragraphs. I think rather than explaining how I came to it, I'll just read it. It'll be clear then.
Okay.
Okay. It'll hardly take 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
In the cottage surrounded by the hibiscus bushes, she was given a room of her own. A huge room with a 4-poster bed, which was used as an extra guest room when Mrs. Sen had visitors. The walls were a sparkling white with small prints of distant mountains adorning the wall. "Come out, Sangeeta, what are you doing inside?" shouted Purvi from the garden. Her voice shrill from the excitement of afternoon mirth. She was darting back and forth behind the huge trunk of mango trees, evading Raji's eyes, who was trying to spot her. But the sprawling gardens, the huge bedroom that shriveled her up into a mute, tiny creature, the food so different from the leftovers she picked up from the waste dump, did not help her to feel happy. The pink doll was tucked away inside the mound of colorful, soft dolls and teddies Raji stored in the corner of her bedroom. Sangeeta never got to see it again. When Mrs. Sen cupped her face again in front of the sparkling women who came to visit her, she thought again of the pink doll. The music was never sung. She longed for the orphanage where she could have run around and played and be with the others like her. The white picturesque cottage and the orchard grew around her, and she coagulated into a silent dot, forgetting the song which she could have sung.
Oh my goodness, extraordinary. So you actually went the other way, which is the music was a trigger for her internalizing her sense of not belonging. Yes, yes. That's interesting too, because in fact in the story it's very much a question of belonging that I examine also. So,
Not full plot, but I thought it was Mrs. Sen's flashback and connecting her childhood to the present day events. Pink doll like girl and what happened to her. Music is what she had aspired to teach her, but voice of yours seems to be the keywords. Intersection, overpass, big cars, cotton candy rainbow are the symbols have been used for indicating different lives. Music is fantasy she may or may not achieve, but finally Mrs. Sen succeeds in helping Anamika find her voice. Though she doesn't win any competition, she doesn't become a singer, but she finds her own voice, and that's a big success.
Interesting. So yours ends on this really interesting positive note. And in a sense, so does yours. I mean, yours is almost like a script, actually. You know, it has has that sort of, narrative. Go ahead, Ramya.
So I don't really have an ending to mine yet, but I wanted the child to hook on to the pink doll rather than the music, because I thought for a child like that who doesn't have anything, and this is the first possession, the first sense of ownership or attachment she has to anything outside her. She attaches to the pink doll, she talks to the pink doll at night, and she imagines conversations with the pink doll. I would like to write this in a magical, I don't know the word for it, but basically in a way that the reader can't quite tell whether the pink doll is actually talking to her or whether it's the child's imagination.
Right.
And it's the child thinks it's the pink doll that's telling her to sing. And when Mrs. Sen takes her away and she says, leave the doll aside because it's dirty and you don't want to catch infections from it, and the child is bewildered, and she finds she's not able to sing when the doll is not with her. Because she's not having any conversations or any of those things. So, but then I got stumped because the title is She Can Sing.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. You can change the title.
I like the title, so I'm going to have to figure out some way to make that work. Her discovery that she can sing even without the pink doll.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
Just written a small piece which continues with the where you stopped. It says, "Really, will you teach me music?" Her eyes welled up with tears, thick droplets staining her smooth skin. Nobody had spoken to her with such passion. And then the story will go like the person she's training her, but it's very difficult for her to carry on because she has been in that environment, and for her to change her behavior is taking her too long. So it's a challenge for Mrs. Sen to struggle. So it is actually the story of her struggle of training the child to be what she wants. So it's not the music that she teaches her, but more of a discipline.
Interesting. So in a sense, you took the main character to end up being Mrs. Sen, or rather, it's her story and her struggles. Yes.
When the child is in the slums and all, it is very difficult to bring them first. Before music, you have to teach them the way of the world, how to behave.
Yes.
Then only you can succeed.
Very interesting. Okay. Lovely. Saloni. Do we have that mic? Can you just pass it, Monica?
I have to say I was really not part of this workshop. I organized it.
You did.
So I have not written for a very long time, and I found myself sort of lost in the opening paragraph, and thinking of what needs to be developed.
Yes.
And I wanted to develop all the characters, Purvi as well as Raji, as well as Anamika / Sangeeta, and her transformation from a nameless girl to a singing girl.
Yes.
And of course, fresh from the violence and the brutality in Alice Munro's book, I was wondering whether there needs to be a violent incident, which is either Purvi's jealousy or Raji's jealousy, or Sangeeta's protection of Mrs. Sen. Because in my mind, the beginning invoked that this girl was a street child. She was abandoned, and she was picked up and rescued by Purvi, and Raji was also one of those that was rescued by Purvi, and she was intensely jealous of Anamika. And Anamika obviously gets adopted, and so the music is the backdrop and is that looking forward to a higher plane in life.
Yes.
So I did not develop it, but these
No,
were the thoughts
yes. Oh, no.
that were there.
Excellent thoughts, and thank you for seeing that much into those first paragraphs. Now, does anyone want to sort of comment on anybody else's development of the story? And
I loved your take on the fantasy and the pink doll because I'm a mother of a 4-year-old and I'm constantly reading short stories to my baby. And in the beginning, she would refuse to let me read the books. She would always say, "Mama, tell me a story, not something that you've read to me before." So I would actually be given a challenge at the end of the day when you're exhausted. You have to think up a story. Fortunately, there are books, and there's one very similar to this, which is called The Magic Dancing Shoes, where there's this grandmother who presents the little girl with, you mind me just telling it quickly?
Of course, please go ahead.
She presents the little girl with this little, you get those transparent things with the little ballerina dancing in the middle of it.
Yes.
So she gives her that, and the little ballerina kind of comes to life in the middle of the night and flutters around her bed and gives her these magic dancing shoes. So when she goes for her magic lessons, her dancing lessons, she puts on the magic shoes and she suddenly realizes that she couldn't do her ballet proper earlier, and now suddenly she's doing it beautifully because of the magic dancing shoes that came from the little fairy. And then at the end you realize she goes for the competition, and just before the school presentation, she can't find her magic shoes and she's sobbing and sobbing there backstage, And the little fairy comes to her and says, "What happened?" And then she says, "Ma'am, but magic dancing shoes are not here." Then she says, "It wasn't the shoes, it was you." And she dances and she, and then the granny gives a little wink to us at the end of it.
Lovely, lovely. Yes, exactly. It's that. It's taking it into sort of fantasy, whether it's really fantasy or, yes, that's right. That's right. Well, what I think is really interesting is that everybody picked up on different aspects of the story, and so much from those paragraphs can be developed into something. And I mean, as I said, if you want to read the final story, the one that I developed, it's right here, and it's a little different from what each of you did, which is really nice. Yeah. And what's also really interesting is that each of you played with all of the elements. There's the element of the pink doll. There's the element of her clearly being a street child of some sort, abandoned. There's the sense that there's this conflict that she's going to be somehow encountering, or some difficulty. And is that resolved by Mrs. Sen? Is that resolved by Purvi or Raji? Where does the pink doll come into play? So those are sort of the questions. Well, I think you all did marvelously well. And something that we offer at Out of Print workshops is that if you'd like to develop the story further and actually write it, then you can send it in to us, and we'll consider it for a publication on the Out of Print blog as a publication of the workshop. So we'd be really thrilled to have all of your stories. In about 2 weeks' time, I'll give you about 2 weeks, because the workshop then will sort of lose its context if we let it run on too long. If you write to us with your story, then my intern, Leela Levitt, who lives in London, will probably sort of run through them first, and then if they're in a state that can actually be developed and edited by us, then we'd be very honored to publish them. So the same story, the story that grew out of the workshop. Other stories you can submit to the magazine, but this is a workshop publication. So do send it to us. Your feedback on the workshop is encouraged too. So look up the blog. There'll be a post about the workshop, and you can either send in a comment to me by email or post a comment, and either way it'll get on the blog. I leave you with some links about starting a short story. They're not necessarily recommendations. They're just stuff off the web. Other people have thought about ways in which to develop short stories. But I think the important thing I want to say is, there are no rules. Don't let the rules sort of bind you. Follow them instinctively, let them sort of inform you as you write, but don't let them stifle you. Remember, there are no prescriptions. but also remember there's a great value, a great virtue to good craft. Good. I leave you with that. Thank you all for being here. It was really a lovely pleasure. I enjoyed it. I hope you had fun. Keep writing.
A very small question.
Of course. I'm so sorry. I did all the talking, didn't let you talk.
It's a question which has been in my mind for a very long time, because I began by writing short stories and now I'm writing my novel. But what I wanted to ask you was that my stories tend to be very short. Like, I've almost completed the story.
Yeah.
I mean, the first draft, of
Yes.
course. And of course, it works out. Now, I always look at a short story as, let's say, a glimpse, a kind of a cross-section of life. Is that the correct thing, or should it have an end, as in an end?
Oh, so again, there are no prescriptions. And what you're talking about, in a way, I suppose, is the difference between a flash fiction and a short story. Again, I'm simplifying too much. I think it has to, for a reader, there's no straight answer, but I think for a reader, it has to have that satisfaction of not just being a static window into something, but actually having a beginning, a middle, and an end, a sense of a conflict, a sense of transition, a sense of passage of something, you know. But you know, there's no prescription.
Pardon me. I mean, if that is done in flashback or somewhere in the dreams, I mean, the past and the present, future come together.
Yes.
But somehow, does it really have to be shown in the plot?
Nothing has to be shown in the plot so long as the reader can understand what it's about, right?
Can I answer a little bit of what my thoughts are on that?
Yes.
Whenever I've been exposed to either a short story or a short film, for me, what's fascinating is you are left thinking of a lot of possible outcomes and a lot of possible endings. That also makes it very, very mysterious and magical.
Yes.
That it's beautiful to read or it's beautiful to look at, but the way it ends, for you, you've written a definite ending, but it can leave you with a number of possibilities.
Very interesting point. Very interesting point. And if you read, for example, Dimensions, there's that sense as well, you know, at the end of it. Even though there is a closure of some kind for some of the characters, but there is still a sense of all that could follow. I think the other thing is that, you see, that's also craft in a short story, which is you don't need to tell everything. You don't need to say, this happened to her and this happened to her. It can emerge as you see